game bookmaking. All you need is tickets and chalk. Change the prices, take money and win. Done our dough, chaps. We've done our dough.
Patronising attitude. Treating us as players.
That's unfair. I would see betting shops return to laying bets as opposed to being mini casinos.
And a very warm welcome to the Bar Stewards Inquiry special sermon. My name's Lee Keys and with me is John Leng. And today we have a very special guest. What a show we have in store, folks. Our special guest today, we pay a very big warm welcome to online and on-course bookmaker, Jeff Banks. Good evening, Jeff.
Good evening, guys.
Good evening. Evening, John. Jeff will debate with us on this show about the betting industry in general, with a bit of blogger and stallion mixed in, because he loves those two. And throughout the show, we will put the questions that you have asked to Jeff with the subjects on topic. Right, we'll start off, Jeff. Obviously, I know who you are. You're very famous family line in bookmaking. But for our listeners that don't know yourself, just give us a bit of background about how you came into the game and, you know, about your life in general.
Okay, very briefly, obviously, I am the son of John Banks, who was an outstanding bookmaker. I would say he was outstanding in the fact that he had a great rapport with his customers. Over many years, he could bet down the back line, and many people will tell fond stories of how he would bet down the back line and be absolutely swamped with people. Even, better pitches weren't doing the business that he was. He was prepared to be out there. He was fearless, known as a fearless gambler. He took people on. He was outspoken. And back in the sort of late 1990s, I worked for my father, mainly in the off-track business, which in those days was just telephones. I used to answer the telephones for him. I worked in a betting shop for 3 years for him. And of course, whenever he went racing, I used to go racing with him, which was always a pleasurable experience. When he retired from the game, I took over his online business. I have to be honest, it wasn't doing at all well at that time. It was losing money. He was doing a lot of promotions and that kind of things, and things were starting to change in the industry back in 2000, that sort of time. And I took over his business, and I think he had 1,100 clients, and I took it over and I whittled those 1,100 clients. My first move was to whittle the 1,100 down to 20. And that 20 clients has, over the years, including the online now, has grown to an online operation of over 20,000. But although that's quite a big number, we're still trying to stay away as an online business from the mass marketplace, because that really is the domain of super betting companies like Bet365. And I've been doing that now, the online part, for probably about a dozen years. The websites and the apps, and we're continuously developing these things. In terms of our pricing strategy, it's very simple. We very much follow Bet365's pricing for horse racing and football and things like that. So if you look at our website, you'll find that we're competing with them. Why do we do it? Well, they take the lowest margin in the sport. Their margins on Saturdays are seriously punter friendly, but it is a margin. It is a way of operating that has been extremely successful. It's a tried and tested formula. Yes, you bet to smaller margins than what you would do if you were, not, for example, offering a best odds guaranteed service bolted on top, which knocks 6% off your margin immediately. But we find it very successful, and we know we don't just match their prices on a day-to-day basis. Overall, our margin is slightly less than Bet365 for horse racing, and it's continuously updated during the course of the day. So that's a brief resume what I do. Obviously, I've got the on-course business, which is more of a social thing, I think is fair to say. It isn't something that's going to make, I'm not going to be driving around in any yellow Rolls Royces out of the profits from on-course bookmaking anymore. And I think, as you know, guys, a lot of major bookmakers have departed distressingly from the on-course market. William Hill, no longer there. Ladbrokes. I was at York recently. A number of notable bookmakers that, ring bookmakers and rails bookmakers that normally you would expect to see there are no longer there. We don't see the likes of David Power, one of the greatest bookmakers in Ireland. We don't see him there. I didn't see Johnny Ridley. As I say, Ladbrokes and Corals and all of the. I think Corals are still there, but Ladbrokes are out of the game. Hills are out the game. Number of and a lot of major companies that we used to recognise on the on-course market have now completely departed, and that's a bit of a shame. But I still enjoy going racing. I love the sport. Fine, I have plenty to say about how it's run, but there's nothing wrong with being outspoken these days, I don't believe. But
can I just ask you, Jeff?
Yeah.
I think some of our listeners might be wondering. You said when you took over, you whittled down the amount of customers.
Yeah.
What was the thinking behind that? Some customers means more profit.
Essentially, my father, God love him, he didn't. In his later years, he spent a lot of time in Las Vegas, more time in Las Vegas than what he spent over in the UK, and he kind of lost focus as to his business. And a lot of his customers, even at that time, even pre-Betfair and things like that, were I mainly customers that he had done business with for a while, but no longer paid their bills. And in those days, John, it was not like it is these days. When a customer bets with me, he funds his account in advance. Yeah. There is no trying to win two battles here. Try to beat the customer financially, but also to get paid. Yeah. And many of the customers that my father was doing business with at that time owed him money. They were still on his books, and they were, merrily betting away. If they won, they collected their checks. If they didn't win, they didn't pay. And so it was a pay thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, people who bet regularly, they didn't have to lose or win, but they bet regularly and they paid their bills.
Yeah.
And that was what it was.
No, fair comment. I mean, like you say, it's an interesting point by John there. Why you would cut, but exactly that. And I think most people know punters these days that they've run up big bills on credit and haven't paid. That's the thing. So yeah, it's a shrewd manoeuvre. Just going back, Jeff. I can remember a time when speculative bid was declared a late non-runner, and this made me howl. It's not for obviously. I got your point. You were very angry about it. Declared a late non-runner by the Ascot, and I can remember you rantings and you actually took the BHA to court.
Yeah.
For basically losses. And how did that go? I actually never followed up with that. How did that all go? What was it like taking the BHA to court?
Some people obviously clearly didn't understand the background of a case like that. First of all, the BHA under Nick Rust, and it was Nick Rust's decision. He told me candidly he made the decision to fight the case. So it was entirely the decision of the CEO of British Racing to take me on. It started off as a small claim for less than £300. Okay, that was all that I had lost, but for me it was a matter of principle. We put over my wife and I now. She's an experienced lawyer. And we put over 14 months of hard work into the preparation of this case, because the BHA itself, they had to have spent a minimum of 50 grand on lawyers and barristers in fighting this case for £250. Instead of picking up the phone to me and saying, "Oh, come on, Jeff, we're sorry about what happened here. here's 250 quid to our favourite charity, can we just move on? They didn't do that. They just basically took the overarching view, the snobbish view that they weren't going to be taken on by a bookmaker, and they were going to fight it. And it's fair to say they came off in an extremely poor light. They lost the case in the court, hands down. There was never any doubt about it. At that point, Nick Rust, asked to meet and discuss a settlement with me, and I did agree to a settlement. And if you ask why I then agreed to settle the case, which I was fighting on the point of principle, you have to bear in mind that they had already spent 50 grand. They would continue to spend probably in excess of another 100 grand in appealing case and taking the case forward on, and they weren't fighting on what actually happened. They were fighting on what's called a duty of care. British horse racing likes to run the sport and be seen as the arbiter of the sport, but they were arguing that they didn't want to be responsible for the decisions that they make in running the sport. It was a ridiculous argument, and one they were very likely to lose. But had I taken the case forward, and if I had lost on points of law for a £250 case, I would have been faced with my own legal bills, which would have been no less than 60 grand, and their legal bills on top, which had been no less than 150 grand. So on a point of principle, the chances were that if we got it wrong, that it would cost well in excess of 200 grand. So if you ask why I agreed to settle at that time, it was the right, if you like, a horrible word, but commercial and sensible decision to make, because nothing in courts is ever worth fighting out to the very bitter end. You know, guys, it's just not.
Yeah. So what happened after that? Because I read that other bookmakers obviously suffered losses that day. What happened to the other bookmakers? What did they do?
They did nothing.
Nothing?
They did nothing. There were one or two that supported and put some, and offered me money, not much money, but they did offer. I wasn't really interested in that. But there were one or two like that. But the vast majority, bookmakers rarely stand together, especially the on-course market. Is something I've never really understood. There's lots of, the Irish are much better than the UK bookmakers. Funny enough, you see Irish bookmakers, they strike. They striked in Dundalk, as you might recall, over conditions set by the racetrack, and so the Irish bookmakers do tend to stand together. But British bookmakers, including the large firms that were betting on track, they had a huge opportunity to put the British Horse Racing Authority on notice, to make them responsible for decisions that they make. And you guys know, as same as me, how many times it happens that they get things wrong. A photo is called the wrong way. A steward's inquiry is called badly, or, and something happens in the sport which costs people money. It might be the bookmakers or it might be the punters. And the BHA, the opportunity was there for the bookmakers, notably the big bookmakers, to make the BHA responsible, to owe everybody in betting on both sides of the cake, to make them responsible for the decisions that they made as the arbiter of the sport. But I was not backed by the other bookmakers. They didn't come in behind me, perhaps because it was me. Slightly the case. But, funny enough, the only big company that actually wrote to me in a very positive light was Bet365. And Bet365 at that time wrote me a very nice letter and said, we would like to support you, but at the moment we're fighting a battle with BHA over the levy, and we only want to fight one battle at a time. But the rest of the big companies basically left me to stand on my own 2 feet. I mean, clearly they had a massive opportunity to protect their own business interests when the BHA get it wrong. And by the way, as far as the punters are concerned, there must be many punters out there who've been on the wrong end of of decisions that the BHA have made. They're stewards, which is often very amateurish. And they still continue to employ amateur stewards. And so the punters are on the wrong end of it, but people decided for their own reasons not to back me. And it was part of my decision, well, if they're not prepared to back me, there's no reason for me to be out on a limb here on my own, fighting something on behalf of the whole industry when they're not backing me.
No, very interesting. No, it's a side that I've never heard. So thanks for that. There is a question from David, that's a very good listener of ours, and he said, "What did you make of your father's ban by the Jockey Club in 1978 over the John Frankham affair?"
This was, funnily enough, the name of the horse that was involved here, which ran at Sandown, was called Stopped. Which probably, given the very amateur nature of stewarding over the years, I mean, no personal disrespect, but it is, as we know, some of the things that go on in the racecourse stewarding is just bizarre. And for some unknown reason, racing has never chosen to engage professional stewarding or to centralize it in an office with experienced panels who only, so there's a consistency in the sport. They actively resist doing that. It's jobs for the boys, as we know, and that's the way it's always been in the sport. It's not productive. It isn't good for the sport. But essentially, this horse called Stopped, they looked at his books, they found nothing, but they still prosecuted him, found him guilty of associations with John Frankham, and warned him off for 3 years, commuted to 2. Now, so did they find any? Was there any evidence for anything that they did for the decision they made? No, there was none. He produced his books to say that he had actually lost, and their case was therefore unproven. They had no financial evidence, and they had no documentary evidence, no telephone records or things like that, as you might have perhaps these days. However, did my father talk to jockeys at a time when he was not supposed to talk to jockeys? Yes, he did. All the time. He spoke to every major jockey of the time. At that time, it was almost an open house. Some of the biggest jockeys in the game, and I do mean biggest jockeys in the game.
What about the trainers?
So was there smoke was there smoke? There was plenty of smoke. My father was associated with jockeys, and he got inside information, and he was he in the same way as information goes around these days, he was on the other side of the fence in those days. And yes, he did associate with jockeys, but they were right in a way to put him off, but for the wrong reasons.
What about the trainers, Jeff? Did he have many associations with trainers? I've heard a bit of anecdotal stuff about his involvement with Ken Payne.
Yeah, my father was a larger-than-life character, John.
As was Ken Payne, yes. I thought.
Yeah. If you cut, many of the greatest figures in racing, your Barney Curleys, and these kind of people are flamboyant. They push the envelope of what's legal in sport, and that's it's always been part and parcel of racing. Slightly murky dealings. It goes on all the time. Has gone on all the time. Horses are run down the park every single day in every single race. So this is nothing new. We can deny that it goes on, but it goes on all the time.
You won't find us denying it.
No, of course. And trainers trainers these days, come out with nice expressions like, we're getting,
anything yesterday's a bonus and all that. Yeah, we get all that sort of cobblers.
They found virtuous ways to describe the fact that, although I think one of the rules of the sport is a bit draconian, which every horse must run on its merits and everything else like that. Well, sometimes you do clearly have horses that will have targets. And maybe, they could modify that rule slightly to allow for a trainer, for example, to admit that, say, for example, a horse is only 80% fit, and has another target in mind, and maybe be a bit more.
Gosden likes telling you they're only 80% fit when they've won, and that tells you what a good trainer he is. He likes to rub it in. Yeah,
but as we know, trainers are they're experts in their game, have a healthy respect for particularly the smaller trainers who's, survived in extremely difficult circumstances, hard to get paid these days, hard to get new owners to come to anybody other than John Gosden or Willie Mullins, and I have a healthy respect for the small trainers doing their absolute best. And whenever they win a big race, it's something to be celebrated. It shows that they do have the talent. If given the stock, many of these trainers are right up there in terms of ability, as your John Gostons of this world.
Jeff, I mean, do you use sort of like inside information to run your books at the moment? Do you have any sort of like good contacts, etc., or do you solely just follow the prices, make a book?
Would you believe me if I said no? Never.
Right. Just wondered what your position was in this day and age.
I have been approached by people. Funny enough, I was approached by, I remember one guy who will remain nameless, who approached me once asking me if he could fund my Betfair account in the time when it would be very easy to do that. And I told him, no, absolutely not. And he was subsequently, less than a year later, warned off by the BHA. They did find out about him. But I've also been approached privately by jockeys over the years. Not many, but I've never been interested in that kind of thing. I've made money in spite of that which goes on in life. It's just never been my game. Okay, fine. My father was thick as thieves into it. It was part of his character. It was part of his makeup. It was part of what made him or in many ways larger than the sport at the time. But for me, it's never been of interest. It's never been the way that I've made money.
Yeah. Good answer.
I focus on the needs of my customers, and that's not a glib statement. It's just something that I have always done. I've always focused on the individual customers that bet with me, and many of them have bet with me for an awful long time.
Okay, so let's get on to the sort of nitty gritty now of the betting industry part of the debate. And I mean, this is something that sort of boils my piss, if you like. The changes in bookmaking. Like I watch videos of Phil Bull going down the line, etc. I've experienced it myself. I'm obviously quite older. I've been on course in the 80s, 90s, and it was a completely different game back then, except before Betfair. But why now can punters just not get a fair bet at a fair price? I mean, this is the thing that I think everyone can't understand. A lot of people that bet just say, well, why have I been refused? What do you think's happened to basically make the sport where it's rather refusing punters than accepting punt bets?
I get your point. I stood on the rails with my father and never recall him ever turning down a bet. In those days, there was no reason to turn down a bet. Most of the favourites that would have run in, your run-of-the-mill races of those days were probably the wrong favourites. And I used to remember people like Michael Taylor. Now, coming down the line and giving my dad bets 10 and 20 grand on this, and my father would take him on all of the time, no problem. Nowadays, I couldn't back a horse with Michael Taylor's firm, with VC Bet, whatever they're called, to win over £1,000. That's not because I'm onto them every morning for morning prices or any other nonsense, or that I've ever shown a profit for my own little personal, having a few fun bets for myself. Over many years, I've probably been doing, had an account with VC Bet for like 2 decades. So I do understand the nature of the problem. But things are, if I could put it this way, rather blown out of proportion by social medias like Twitter. You see a lot of anonymous characters, and they are anonymous. They don't use their own names, like John or Bill or the trader, who are endlessly complaining about the fact that they can't get bets, with bookmakers, and they joke with each other. When you actually boil down to nitty gritty of what they're telling you that they've got many accounts with these bookmakers. They're opening up many accounts, and basically it's because they're finding that as each avenue gets closed off, they open up another one and another one and another one, and they're paying people to do that kind of thing. What has changed to create that landscape where these guys are so vocal? And I just want to make one thing clear. I do believe, right to my very core of my being, that well in excess of, say, 95% of all bettors get exactly what they want. Whether they win or whether they lose is not important. The most casual investors just get exactly what they want. So this is not the huge problem that it is appears to be. Most people get their bets, no problem. I could show you my own books. I'm not going to, I'm not allowed to, but I could show you my own books, and you would be surprised at how small it is, the percentage of people who come on board with us who do end up getting restricted, but they make a hell of a noise, understandably, in a way, if they should get restricted in any way, shape or form. What changed the landscape was essentially betting exchanges. Betting exchanges were the very first medium that allowed a punter to trade with the bookmaker, and the word is trade, not bet, and show a profit regardless of how he operated. I'll give you a very simple example, which I'm sure you're familiar with. We would offer, for example, we offered in the Cheltenham Festival extra places throughout the Cheltenham Festival. This was about 2 or 3 years ago, and we were beset by people opening up new accounts, lots of them, thousands of new accounts. Basically, what they were doing is they would bet 3 and 4 horses per race at the Cheltenham Festival each way, and all they were doing was laying those bets back. And if the horses ran into the extra place that we allowed, they would get paid by us, and they would not have to lay the contra bet on the exchange. So basically, it was gravy. And on top of that, they were, as traders, they would always seek out prices that maybe have expired on the betting exchange, and they get a slight advantage before they even start. Now, that situation, that's just one example of many tools and tricks. They're not tricks in terms of there's nothing wrong with what they're doing, but I mean the methodology of these people use in order to guarantee to lock in a profit, and that is what's changed. These people, and there are plenty of people that are sitting at home engaged in this activity, in my view, have to accept their situation, that it is part and parcel of the game, that bookmakers are not going to afford a business to somebody else running their business with them as the conduit. The bookmakers are not going to allow these people to remain long on their platforms once they've been identified, simply because every single bet that customer gives you has to be at the top of the market and better than the top of the market, because they're only ever going to give you a bet when you are out of line with other bookmakers, and notably with the betting exchange. That's what's, I understand it irks some people, and I see, a lot of complaints on Twitter and everything else like that about people getting restricted, and they're very hostile. And I understand that, the hostility, but the hostility is based on the fact that we are basically closing off an avenue of profit to them, and they don't like it.
Yeah, but I mean, this is the thing, right? I would say, and this is my experience of the game, that the reason why only, I would say, 5% of punters make it pay, or roughly to that figure, is the reason that they can't control themselves, right? That discipline is probably the most underrated factor in any person's betting, right? You know this, because punters will back a winner or back a winner or two, and they'll study the form, they'll get the price, they'll fleece you, they'll have 4-1 about a 7-4 chance, whatever, which long term's no good. However, this is where I have a problem with bookmakers suspending accounts or not bothered after a few bets, right? You have not experienced that punter on the needle day where he's had an even monkey one that's got a terrible ride. It's won by a short head but got disqualified in a steward's inquiry. He's got the needle, and then the next bet is the chase. And this is the thing. For years, I have seen it. I mean, I do it for a living. I've done it myself. I've had the needle. There's times when I have had the needle, and I've done things I shouldn't. And that's my point. That the majority of the betting public cannot control themselves, and that's how betting is. That's why there's not many people left standing at the final bell. And this is,
you're right. I get the point you make. There are people, and this is one of the reasons why, again, I will tell you very honestly, we try to give people a much bigger amount of crack with us, if that's the right word, when they bet with us. And if we ever have to factor somebody, the big firms will be able to factor somebody within between 1 and 3 bets. Within 1 and 3 bets with their software, they are able to identify traders extremely rapidly and close them down within a couple of bets. We don't do that. First of all, we don't use that kind of software to spy on people, cookies, and everything else that some of the big firms get up to. We give people a much longer spell with us before we have to modify their account. And if you ask how is the accounts modified, I mean, I read somebody saying yesterday that he rung up my office and he was told that he would only be able to have £2 each way and all this kind of nonsense. I mean, these kind of stories are just a wheeze. It's just nonsense. How we restrict people is by, if we find, for example, somebody who beats us consistently on the price, we will find a way to structure the pricing that they can take. Maybe it's time dependent. Maybe we'll only lay them at board prices or something like that, which we use quite a lot with people who are trading. We will restrict them to, say, board price only, as opposed to allowing them the oxygen of being able to bet overnight or, first thing in the morning, that kind of thing, where the market is extremely fluid. We will allow them only to bet at board price where the market has settled down and where the bets that they're placing are nearer to the correct price for the horse. And at the end of the day, no business is going to, I would be a shocking businessman if I allowed somebody out of sheer arrogance to continue to bet with me because he's betting 4-1 about something at 7-4, and this kind of thing happens a lot when they're in the know. I get your point about that there are people that are undisciplined, but what I'm talking about, the people that are restricted with us, and we will get it wrong. I completely admit that. We will have had customers that we may have factored, we may have put on SP only, or might put on board price only or something like that, or removed their best odds guarantee or something like that. We tend not to, we don't like to restrict a customer to bet a horse with us to lose anything less than £100. So that's bigger than most firms. If it gets to less than £100, we will just close them. And I will tell you that we close very few accounts, because once you remove their ability to take that 4-1 that's at 9 a.m. in the morning, and you turn around and you're basically saying to them, well, we're going to let you bet only at the truer price of the selection, that is just simply sound business. Of course, it takes away their profit. It takes away their trading angle, if you like. I promise you, we will get things wrong. We will have people that we have factored, and I freely admit that we would get it wrong. They've just gone on a bit of a run with us, and we've looked at it, and they've had 10 bets, and 9 of them or 8 of them have beaten us on the price, that kind of thing. Or it's usually much longer than that, by the way. And so we do give people a much longer crack of the whip, and we are trying only to filter out those people, because a lot of people are extremely, you may not be, John, but a lot of people are extremely disciplined about their trading. They will only give you a bet when they can beat you on the price, when they know the price has evaporated on the betting exchanges, notably, And
but Jeff, I mean that
very disciplined.
That's different. I mean, if they're always trying to penny pinch the price, i.e., they're only betting with you when your top price, etc., etc. I get this. I get this from your point of view, and I'm not here to roast you and say, but I mean, at the end of the day, if you are, I mean, I've had plenty of messages, and this is the reason I'm putting these questions, because it's pointless, it's pointless abuse. I've had plenty of questions saying that Jeff doesn't take a bet, Jeff banned me after 3 bets, blah, blah, blah. And I know what you're saying. It's an easy thing to say. Yeah.
They would attack any bookmaker. Despite that I'm more outspoken. I mean, I have people that attack me on Twitter. Oh, you don't do this, you don't do that. And I look them up and I can't even find they've even got an account. I mean, it's just, but people will, of course, rant at something that where the gravy has been removed from their plate.
But the thing is, race. When I was growing up, racing was sold to me as a dream. My father was a bookmaker. I worked for my father on course, clerking and tic-tacking, and so I got a good grounding to the game. Yeah. And as times pass by, I'm struggling to see an upside for the punter. The thing is, I was sold the dream as a youngster. I paid £100 for 2 years worth of Sporting Lifes to study the back form, just the reading of trainers' comments, just learning the game, and it's things like that. There's no more dream. Clive Holt, be a successful punter with fine form as your guide. Everyone would read that as a youngster or coming into the game. And I think that's what's sad now, that there's no dream for a punter anymore. It simply is, if you show a bit of form, that's it. You're out of there.
I think you need to properly divide. You can't use the word punter to describe everybody, and I think this is part of the misconception. With respect, a punter is somebody who, for want of a better expression, picks up the paper, studies the form. Maybe he may be involved in a group of people who study form and are very good at it. But in the main, they will study the form and they'll look at it and they'll have their bet, and it'll be us against them. And everybody's got a fair crack of the whip. Some punters are more inspired than others. They put more work into it, and they may make it pay. But where you have to divide those type of customers with those that are trading for profit and are there to lock in a profit by employing sophisticated tools and exchanges and match betting that goes on an awful lot. There's an awful lot of match betting out there, and people matching their bets. As soon as they have the bet with us, they're having a contra bet back on the exchange, locking a profit, and they're doing that rapidly, as many times a day, and they can make very significant profits. And I think in any conversation, what I'm asking you to accept, for people to accept who listen to this podcast, this fun podcast, I hope, is to try to divide between the two. What is a genuine punter and what is a trader? And traders are basically doing the same job as me, with respect. And when you're doing the same job as me, we are going to filter you out, because if you're trading and you're in business, you're trying to run a business off mine and companies like mine, because of course we're all having to factor people these days. So that's where we need to divide the two types of people. It never used to happen in the past, not in my dad's day. There were more inspired punters. You talk about Phil Bull, Michael Tabor, JP McManus, and these kind of things going up and down the rail. But essentially, it was your opinion and their opinion against their opinion. There was no betting exchange. There was no 100% books, as there is these days. Bookmakers would bet to an appreciable margin, a good profit margin. And as I say, there wasn't the level of information as is pumped into the average race in a betting exchange show, which is like a hodgepodge of various factors to arrive at an absolute price for a particular horse.
Yeah, I mean, just to basically ask you a question then. So somebody like myself, if I came to you at midday and, asked for a wager, what would you say to me?
As long as your stakes are reasonably consistent, we are extremely good layers. We may not be as vocal as Ben from Star Sports and telling everybody what bets he lays and all the rest of this stuff that goes on all the time, and him saying, "Oh, I've laid an even $100,000." And we're not vocal on what we lay, but we do lay very hefty bets every single day, and many of those bets are quite often to people we don't know. I'm not talking about laying bets to people that we do know. Oh, we beat them all the time, so we lay them big bets, and that's fine. We are extremely good layers. We are at the top of the market in terms of the prices from the betting companies. If you follow Bet365's prices, you are aggressive. You are competitive in today's environment because they are the most competitive firm out there. We offer a best odds guaranteed service that many of the little independents do not offer. And that is a significant bonus plus for the betting customer. So we have, last week throughout York, we were giving money back for any horse that finished second. So that went throughout the meeting, and with a few races accepted, like very small fields, but that didn't happen often at York. So it was always, we are always trying to give a little bit of a tonic for the customer. I get, that the traders, what I call the traders, I don't mean that any disrespect to anybody, but if you are trading, accept that that's what you do for a living. And if the bookmaker closes you down, smile, because you've done well, because you've made a profit, you've shown a profit, everybody's gone well with your business. Smile and gently move on, and rather than coming on Twitter yelling, because Billy blogger, these bookmakers close me down and they're all tossers and all this kind of stuff. It's a bit pointless. It's boring. You're in business, we're in business. We are going to filter you out if it's apparent that you're running a business off of ours.
So basically what you're saying is that anyone that shows winning form will be gone? No. So it is possible. It's largely,
it's not winning form. We don't close people. We have lots. I think over in the average year, at least 30% of our customers win. If we were to close all our client base, those that win off us throughout the year, we wouldn't have much of a business by the end of the year. People will show a profit off you. It isn't down to that. It is where you notice that somebody, and by the way, it's really crystal clear. There's a lot of the people that do get factored. It's very crystal clear. You can look at it. They've had 20, 30 bets, and the discipline that they lack is that, for many of them, is that they don't hide any of what they're doing. They just arb, for example, if it's an arbing account, or they trade, for example, the extra places or whatever their angle is, and they do that all of the time. When you talk about the discipline, a lot of the traders who end up getting factored are not very disciplined in that they don't mask carefully that which they get up to. They're too transparent, and the best traders, those that really survive, that sit under the radar, are very clever about how they go about it. Not every bet has to beat the bookmaker sideways on price. They're very good at it. And there are plenty of people out there who are successful, and they earn my respect because they do stay under the radar. And there will be people listening to this podcast who have made money out of my firm for many years and still sitting under the radar and with their accounts open. It isn't a win and lose thing. It's easy to look upon it that way, but we don't close accounts because they happen to win. We close accounts if we look at something we forecast that they're endlessly going to beat us on the price, and we can lay that horse, dog, football team at less consistently, because it's just poor business just to be continuously laying one person the prices that are evidently wrong. And, people act as if they have a right. Oh, well, you put that price up, Jeff, and I took that price, and you didn't, you complained to me about whatever. Well, but you do that every day and every race. So, how long do you expect me to continue to keep you in eggs and bacon on your table every morning? Be realistic, be respectful of each other's position, which is important. Respect. I respect your view. You're going to try and run a business off me, but you must respect my view, which is, well, if we find you, if we detect you, we're obviously going to factor you by basically our number one medium for people that we do end up, unfortunately, having to restrict, and it's a very small percentage, is by the price, when they can bet with us. Or whether they're even able to take a price with us. For example, a starting price only would be essentially maximum restriction for us. It's not about the money or how much they get on. It's about what price they take.
So basically, what you're saying is it's the people that always want the top price. They want to fleece you in the morning. Blah blah blah. They're the ones. Yeah.
They're proud to do it. They'll come on Twitter in their anonymous names, and they'll blag about it. They're very proud, and they think they're very clever. And some of them are very clever in the manner in which they do things, but some of them are just not very clever. They're very transparent. They don't put a lot of effort into, keeping the account open, and that's the key. Key is to be clever enough to have the account open. If you want to be a really good trader, you don't fleece the bookmaker all of the time. You don't make it obvious that you'll always have to have an edge, that the concept of the bookmakers, bored of you because you essentially are always beating them on the price. You're clever about it. You have to be clever about it these days. You have to be. It's a bit of give and take, and at the end of the day, you accept your wage.
So basically, your key algorithm for punters going forward is if you're beating the price by some way. Obviously,
over probably an average of between 20, a minimum of 20, and say a maximum of 50 bets.
There you go, folks.
We could adopt a much more draconian system, and have there been people that have been restricted who have had less than 20 bets? Yeah, but it's a seriously tiny fraction of 1%.
Thank you, Jeff Banks, for your answers on that topic. Right, we move on to our next part, where we've kind of over-egged the pudding on that, but never mind. We're on to the future of on-course bookmaking, Jeff. And I mean, I've got my grave concerns because in the old days it was Big Mac, and it was we had characters in the ring, and we used to beat the betting tax on course. It was a fantastic, vibrant arena back in the day. Yeah. What's the future now for on-course bookmaking? What does Jeff Banks do? If you were in charge now, what can we do to revitalise on-course bookmaking?
As it stands, right, I want my colleagues on track to prosper. Clearly, I do. I have many people that I've associated with on track, that I have many friends that I love chatting to on the racetrack. I'm sure there are people that I would like them to survive as an industry. I think racetracks have to. I think racetracks not all of them. Some of them are very progressive, but many racetracks still continue to look down on bookmakers. I mean, the man that works for me, one of my chief lieutenant on track, is a 78-year-old man who's being asked to go to racetracks at 10 o'clock in the morning in order to pitch up for the first race that doesn't start till well past 1 o'clock in the afternoon by some racetracks. The racetracks might ask the bookmakers to park half a mile away from the racetrack and make them and charge them for the privilege as well, and they're pushing all this heavy gear around and whatever. The bookmakers not only generate an enormous amount of fees for racetracks, but they are actually the very engine of that racetrack's business. They are the very fabric of British racing. Anybody that goes racing in France knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's soulless. It's utterly soulless. So the on-course bookmakers, they can be a bit grubby. They can be a bit shabby. But at the end, in terms of their dress sense and their attitude sometimes, but at the end of the day, they are the very central draw of any racetrack. And I appeal to racetracks to treat them better than what they're being treated right now. By the same token, I think the bookmakers on course have to get real. And this is one area that I've engaged with a few bookmakers on Twitter who are my colleagues and everything else like that. If you do not recognise that the threat of the online market, they're doing the same job as you. When customers are going on racetracks with betting apps in their hand, with mobile phones, and if you do not compete head on with the online market and the offers that they're making, the price strategies that they have, and the same each way terms, and possibly a few extra places from time to time, then you are a poor businessman. Your business will go nowhere because you are simply not competing. And then this is why what I've noticed over the last decade is a serious decline in the amount of money that bookmakers turn over on racetracks. And it's a very serious situation. They often take less than £500 per race in turnover, and at the smaller meetings, and that just basically is barely, if at all, a functioning business. It's almost impossible to trade a profit. You're working for minuscule margins, and it can go badly wrong. As you know, like you get several favourites in a row, it could go badly wrong. But the bookmakers have to recognise the threat from the online market and find ways to compete with them in order to restore confidence of particularly larger bettors returning to racetracks and actually having a bet. Because who's going to have that's in any way educated as a punter? Who's going to have 500 or 1,000 with a bookmaker if he's offering, say it's 500 each way in the Ebor, and the bookmaker's betting to a fifth of the odds in the Ebor handicap, as they do? Who's going to have that bet with the on-course bookmaker when he can have the same bet with Bet365 at a quarter the odds, may even get an extra place, and will also maybe get a free bet afterwards, and will get best odds guaranteed bolted on top. Now, these are all things that my firm certainly offers as an online operation. And when I went to York this week, I offered best odds guaranteed throughout the meeting to any bettor at York who came up to any bet up to £200 win or £200 each way. These are the kind of things that bookmakers on track need to be doing in order to restore their turnover, to encourage the largest staking punters who are vital to the bookmakers to return to the betting rings.
But why don't bookmakers bet to an opinion? What's gone wrong with them? I mean, there's been some great bookmakers in the past that have bet to opinion, and this is the problem for me, that you need a USP. You need you've more or less highlighted it. You need a unique selling point, and for me, the way forward is simply to offer value that doesn't exist on the off course. This is to stop looking in your Betfair machines. This is to get an opinion. Like arseholes, everyone's got one. And to basically, generate. A punter can say, I went on course today at York or Catterick or Ascot or anywhere and said, I got 5-2 this. It was only 2-1 in the offices, 9-4. When I got 5-2 because a bookmaker stood out on a limb. They're all just bean counters looking at the machine. Yep. Just betting to the machine, Jeff.
Yes, I know, and it's exceptionally boring to the customers in many ways, especially the educated punters, and we have to consider them notably because they're the ones that are going to come, for example, racing midweek. They're not you're not your casual race girl that might only turn up on a Saturday. They're very educated punters, and when they go along a line and they see 7-4, 7-4, 7-4, 7-4, you can understand why they consider this is a cartel here. I mean, I don't need to go on racetracks. I can just sit at home in my underpants and have the same bet with Betfair, and I won't get 7-4. I might get 15-8, for example, on my money because I know the bookmakers are betting pretty hard up on Betfair, but I can probably still get a little bit of value. So what's the point in having a bet with a bookmaker? And it is boring. It is a boring system, but it's laziness on the part of on some part of some bookmakers, and in the other, and for many of them is latent inexperience. Most firms on the racetracks these days are not grounded, in the kind of training that I had. For example, I'm not just talking about myself, but there are many, who grew up in the industry and learnt about coupled odds and margins and percentages and when was good to be laying each way and when was not, and everything else like that. My dad used to drive me down to Brighton Dogs every night, and he would drill me, school me to look at a board without any computers or anything else like that, because they didn't exist in those days, and appraise what the betting margin is, and sort of turn around to me and say, right, pick these 3 horses at 3 different prices, tell me what the coupled odds are, and that kind of thing. That was my training, and I did that for when I worked for him on track for maybe around about 10 years, on and off whenever he was in the country. And that was my grounding, that was my training. But the average bookmaker these days doesn't have that kind of training. The average bookmaker only understands the bet that he takes and the price on the betting exchange. He uses the betting exchange to increase his margin, and that is a functioning business. But unfortunately, it is a business that is in notable decline.
Yeah, I mean, what would you say to Carn Berry's question here? He's a Betfair trader, and he's quite a pertinent question. He said, "What's it like to inherit one of the highest profile bookie brands in the country, and then watch it fizzle away while sulking about Betfair and traders every week?"
Well, I think I had this conversation. Carn, with respect to him. I've been telling him for years that Betfair is a bubble and that it was going to burst. And anybody that looks at Betfair's figures, anybody that watches the NFL on a Sunday night and tries to have bet on Betfair is going to struggle to find any markets, any liquidity whatsoever on the betting exchange. And it won't be another decade before Betfair as a medium disappears completely. There is a diminishing number of markets where Betfair's power still retains some power, and there is not enough liquidity in the market to keep any more than one exchange going, as you know. So, football matches, for example, cricket matches tend to do well, but, even if you go to Cheltenham, it's rare if you can back, say, a 12-1 chance and have more than 20 quid on at the price, at the available price at any one time. And I've been saying this to Carn. I said this to him, probably more than 5 years ago, that the prognosis for Betfair is not a good one. And by the way, this was something that Brian Corcoran, who was the CEO of Betfair, when he moved over to take over that company, saw for himself, and he transformed the company from being a betting exchange principally to a sports book, as you know. So they recognized the signs, the lack of turnover on their exchange for themselves. They knew that it was that those that were laying were basically companies, laying bets at cyber speeds and everything else like that. And as you know, they put them on, draconian commission rates and that kind of thing. So Betfair has not long to go. But unfortunately, as far as my business is flying, I have an exceptional business, so I don't have anything to defend from him. Maybe he's just a little bit jealous. But the bottom line is that I started from very small beginnings, and I've grown the business exponentially to what it is right now, competing in the marketplace and surviving in a fiercely competitive environment for an awful long time, for many years, for 2 decades, in fact. And that's a pretty good performance. So I don't have to take lessons from the likes of Carn sitting in his underpants and trading his bets on Betfair. Good luck to him. Good luck to him. I hope he does well. But by comparison to what he can earn and what I earn in life, he is, he's a pinprick.
Carn did a fantastic thread on Afghanistan, by the way. Apparently it was Bumming Wednesdays when he was in Afghanistan. I love that one. Anyway, that's
I believe it. I'm sure he's a successful trader, and I'm sure he does well. But he has never accepted the obvious. And anybody that looks at Betfair's liquidity cannot argue with this central point. It is a diminishing product. It has got a limited shelf life. Everybody knows that it's got a limited shelf life. The markets are disappearing on a daily basis, and it's a very expensive product to run. Every market on Betfair has to be sent off. It has to be managed. It's an expensive business to run, and it's no surprise to me that Betfair now is part of the Paddy Power empire, and that the main focus of that company is the sportsbook.
Okay, so let's move on then to before we come on to a favourite part of our show, which is the the most interesting topic, which is Blogger affordability checks.
Yeah.
Where do we stand on this?
Okay, so this is something that we as a company, obviously, we have to be compliant, and we follow the rules.
Compliant for what though? It's not law.
Well, no, it's a good point. And I do understand that point. To ask, for example, I think myself personally, I've got a couple of betting accounts. I'm not a big better for myself because, of course, as you can appreciate, in every market, I've already got an interest looking at what my online operation is doing. So I don't need to have a bet for myself. But I have had accounts with firms like, for example, Victor Chandler and Betfair. Both of those are currently suspended because they've been asking me questions. It's a bit bizarre because, I've said both of them, for example, they should know who I am. And I've said both of them my gambling commission license, which means, I'm running major online UK betting operation here. They should know this. But the affordability checks are being run by complete novices, people that are new into the game, been hired in by the firm to handle this thing, and they wouldn't know who Victor Chandler is, for example. They certainly don't know who I am, and it doesn't seem of any importance to them. All that matters to them is to send out requests to people for P60s, for invoices, for bank statements, for wage slips, and everything else like that. Now, your point that you're making is it legal? Are the requests being made by bookmakers from punters in order to be compliant to this affordability checking that the Gambling Commission under Neil MacArthur has been requesting of the firms? My opinion is absolutely not. I believe it transgresses the Information Commissioner's Office's mandates on multi-levels. At the end of the day, people have a right to privacy. It isn't the business of William Hill. It certainly isn't the business of Betfair to know how much I or any other of their customers earn in life, or, more importantly, what they decide to spend their money on. I believe that these measures laid down by the Gambling Commission were in an effort largely to appeal to placate vocal focus groups on Twitter and certain Labour MPs driving an agenda to essentially big up their own profile, claiming that there was a massive problem gambling issue in the United Kingdom, which there is not. It is a world low, as a matter of fact. And they drove this agenda, and the Gambling Commission felt, I think under MacArthur, felt it was important to be seen to be doing something. And this is what they chose to do. And in my opinion, it was an ill-judged maneuver. It's got them at odds with the Information Commissioner's Office, whose mandate is to protect the privacy of people, the right to somebody's personal information. Who are these betting companies asking for people's bank statements? We have to do it.
Well,
we have to do it.
This is interesting for you and our listeners that I was also a victim of this from Betfair and long-term customer, and I was inactive for around 3 weeks due to their suspension of my account, so to speak. So I produced documents. it got of share values, etc., personal finances. I actually called the bluff. I just produced it. Still nothing. Absolutely nothing came from Betfair. So what I did, I decided to tag their legal eagles and bigwigs in this, and I emailed them and I said, if this doesn't get resolved, I'm going to take legal action, because I don't believe you have the right to have my documentation about my personal financial data. I don't know what rights you have. As soon as I said that, they reinstated me within 24 hours. Yeah. No questions. Done.
I challenged with the Information Commissioner's Office the rights to Victor Chandler's operation, VCBet, whatever they're called, they keep changing their name, VCBet, to documentation that they were demanding of me. But personally, as I say, they were complete dumbass. If you don't know who I am, and if you don't know that I'm a substantial betting operator and I shouldn't have to produce affordability checks for the level of activity that I was doing, which was minuscule by comparison to my online business. I mean, totally minuscule. But I challenged it with the Information Commissioner's Office. I received a letter back from the Information Commissioner saying that they agreed with me that the requests being made by VCBet were out of order, were effectively a breach, and that they had been in touch with Victor Chandler and they would be in touch with me to sort the matter out. That would have been a minimum of 2 months ago. I've heard nothing from VCBet yet. I mean, so, it doesn't bother me not to have the account, but it does show one thing: what the Gambling Commission is requesting of operators and what the Information Commissioner's Office mandate appear to be entirely at odds with each other. And I don't know where this all ends up. For the time being, as far as our operation is concerned, we will run our business and be compliant and obey the letter of the law, because that's what we have to do to maintain our license. And we will do that. We will do that diligently, but with respect to the customers.
But it isn't law.
Yeah, I get that, but who's challenging it?
Well, this is the thing.
Where's this, this so-called noted the horse race bettors forum? Where are people like that representing the customers and turning around and writing to the Information Commissioner's Office and writing to the Gambling Commission and saying, excuse me, but is it even legal that I'm required to produce a P60 for William Hill?
I agree. They're awful.
Show them my net worth.
Yeah, they're awful. I mean, I've seen, like I said, there's a lot that's on that panel that literally don't. I don't know. It's Simon Rowlands. You've got Martin Hughes. I know he bets in running for a living, but I mean, what's that?
Yeah, they're useless. They're all collectively useless because they're not really representing the punters. It's just another moaning forum. It's another Twitter. And so they're not acting on behalf of the customers, writing letters. One of the most effective mediums that's popped up in the last couple of years has been the Betting and Gaming Council that now represents the major online firms. Now, I personally, I'm not a member of them, but I've seen many of the steps they've taken, and many of those have driven a very effective, responsible gambling message. And it appears to me they've done a very good job in negotiating on behalf of customers and bookmakers with the politicians. And that's a notable success story. But what I don't see happening is the punters themselves steaming into the Information Commissioner's Office with lawyers and sort of saying, hold on a second, why is Betfair demanding all this information from us, demanding to know how much I earn? At the end of the day, I could go into Threshers tonight and every night, and I could order myself a couple of cases of wine every night. Nobody would ask me why, where do I get the money to order all this wine? Nobody would care. Nobody would care whether it was dangerous for me health-wise or not. Nobody would care.
No.
I could go and I could empty every credit card I like in life on Amazon.com, and nobody would care. Nobody would ask me to prove that I can afford this money. I could chain smoke till I die. I could order X number of billion packets of cigarettes and nobody would care. There's no affordability checks. There are no affordability checks in any other industry that I know. You know, it's an entirely unique situation which appears to be singling out the gambling industry for special attention. Why? Because it's popular on Twitter, because it keeps certain responsible the focus groups, the ones that scream that everybody should do as they say, not do as they do. You know, all these virtuous people telling us we shouldn't be gambling, we shouldn't be smoking, we shouldn't be drinking, we shouldn't be driving our cars, and we all must have a PCR test if we're 4 years of age. These are the type of people who want to tell us how to live our lives, and I'm afraid, you know, it'll be a while till we get away and we start, you know, looking at the vast majority of people who do gamble sensibly, who do gamble within their means, and respecting their rights, which is not being respected currently, their rights to privacy, and respecting one thing I think the Gambling Commission and every other regulator should be looking at is the customer experience. How is the experience of doing business with these companies? Is it good, or has it deteriorated markedly? Well, clearly
markedly.
It has. Do
Yeah.
you agree with that?
Totally. I mean, this is it. I mean,
why is that of no interest whatsoever to the regulator? Why are they not focused on the customer experience for the punters? Why is it that they should have to sit on a live chat, wait for weeks and weeks and weeks for their data to be read by some complete numpty who's just arrived in the game, getting paid 25,000 quid to go through bank statements? What on earth is the right of that company even to demand it? How is that service to that customer being improved? It's been marked down. I've never seen a worse situation in terms of customer relations. My own company, we work very, very hard in this department to negotiate with our customers to try to get them to provide us with sufficient data, adequate data to be compliant within the letter laid down by the Gambling Commission. That and no more.
Well, I would be disappointed, Jeff, in you and your company if you're demanding to see documents. Is that true? Are you demanding to see documents?
Yes. Yeah, we have to see documents.
Why? It's not law.
But we don't. No, I do understand that. But until
I can't have that argument. No, you don't understand it. It's not law, so it's not requirement. So you are acting on an unelected body, a government quango that basically is requesting that you do something, but it's not law.
These are it is my opinion. It is my opinion that what the Gambling Commission is asking the bookmakers to do, and how the bookmakers are interpreting that, by the way, is not legal. But I don't know. I don't know what.
I'd take you to court if you demanded my IG share account, and you demanded my savings account, and you demanded everything that to see that I could afford to bet with Jeff Banks. I would seriously question your credence in law to be able to view that data.
But look, I'm very sympathetic to that point of view. I'm not arguing with you about this. When I questioned the legality of things with regard to VCBet, it was because they didn't just ask for one thing; they asked for about 6 or 7 things.
Absolutely,
it was like a full financial workup. And when you talk about these full financial workup, this is what Neil MacArthur didn't get. When you do a financial workup on somebody, that's an inspection on somebody's accounts for that particular moment. That's that little section of life, that month, that week, of how their finances are and whether they can afford things. How does that change the following month? Will it be the same? Of course not. It's rarely the same. People's finances ebb and flow like the oceans.
So you're arguing against it, but you're demanding customers produce it.
I am mandated to, as condition of license.
No. That's not true.
It isn't.
No. That's not condition true of license. No, not at all. That has to be mandated by government, has to be passed through Parliament in law. This is not mandated. Bookmakers have seized the opportunity to do this. Why are they doing it? I asked you.
It is unclear to me the level of information that's being requested, and I can only draw on my own experience here, you understand, in terms of what's being asked for by other companies. But it is unclear to me the depths of inspections that are being requested and how unrealistic they are, given that we are talking about a snapshot in time of somebody's, in order for an affordability check to be working, you would have to do it a dozen times a year. I mean, people's finances flow with the wind, as I say. You would have to do it a dozen times a year. You can't just do it once and then come back.
But you're just highlighting to me that this is more sinister than takes the eye. Originally, I thought this was incompetence. I thought this was just sheer incompetence of Romanian staff at Betfair, online checklists, where you couldn't speak to a member of staff. I just thought this was just conspiracy. But you're highlighting to me now that this is more or less sinister, as in bookmakers are using this to potentially.
I have taken this up with. The people that work in the Gambling Commission. I've had many conversations with, with officials that work at the Gambling Commission. I have to say that there's an awful lot of extremely bright and intelligent people that work there, and that my conversations with them have always been, I wouldn't say friendly, but always been very businesslike and everything like that. But I think in this regard, they've got things totally wrong. This is the wrong way of going about it. Will it change? I hope it will change. They've got a new boss there now. I hope he finds a better way to going about it. It's my view, it's my opinion that what is being asked for by the betting companies, transgresses the information commissioners, our rights to privacy, our right to run our own lives without being inspected. We're not talking about trying to ask Victor Chandler for a mortgage here.
No.
You're not asking them to give you 30 grand, 50 grand, 100 grand to buy a house, and therefore they require to look at your finances and everything else like that. You're talking about a situation where the Gambling Commission have decided to control people's gambling by making bookmakers some kind of Maigret, some kind of Columbo character, to try to work out how much somebody can reasonably afford on their betting activity. But more sinister than that, as you say, is why it is they feel that bookmakers should be the arbiter of how much, when, why, or wherefore somebody decides to spend their money.
And let's be fair, it's not the CEOs making this decision. It's an ex-bin man that might be have got a job with Betfair or Paddy Power that as examining someone's personal data and deciding whether he or she could not bet anymore. Yeah. I mean, this is how serious we're at, and this will have legal reparations. And believe me, I told Betfair this.
Have you written to the Information Commissioner's office?
Well, I went to I was on the front page of the Racing Post, and believe me, as soon as I went bananas at Betfair,
the Racing Post works for the Racing Post is the arm of big betting.
Absolutely, but at the end of the day, they don't appear on the front of the Racing Post as to why an account's nearly £1 million in front, and he's been barred from betting on affordability checks.
It makes no commercial sense for the Racing Post to represent punters because their biggest sponsors happen to be bookmakers. They advertise in the Racing Post every single day, so they're not going to be too sympathetic from your point of view. The right medium to be asking to are A, the Gambling Commission, and B, the Information Commissioner's office, and getting an answer from one of the but watch this space. I'm uncomfortable with the situation, and
I'd be uncomfortable if I were you, Jeff, after asking your customers on this basis. Because if I was one of your customers, I'd be looking at my lawyer on this.
We negotiate with our customers, and we do things in a civilized and gentlemanly fashion. And if we feel that people are getting, losing more than they can reasonably afford, it's certainly not. I don't care what the Gambling Commission say about in reaction to Twitter or to Caroline Harris or people like that. What interests me in life is that my customers can afford to bet with me, and that they will remain as a customer of mine for the next 2-3 decades. It is not in my interest to rape them senseless, for want of a better expression, from their earnings and in one little cell of life for minor commercial gain for me, and then lose that customer as a customer for years on end because they exclude from me because of that behavior. It is not in my commercial interest. I need to make sure that my customers can afford to lose money with me, but we do it in a better. I'm confident one thing: we do it in a better way.
Remember, the Gambling Commission is not the law. They are recommending on advice. It is not the law. So I advise you as a company to go on what you feel best. It is not law. It is not set in stone. It is not passed through Parliament. This is a government quango, and you need to act on that. Anyway, thanks for that, Jeff, on that. We shall finish on Blogger and the social aspect regarding the sport. Rod Street put a Twitter thread the other day promoting that racing was thriving from a social aspect. John, you still awake?
Yes, I am, yeah.
John's listening intently. I love it. Yeah,
I enjoy listening, actually.
Yeah. I mean, we've had the, obviously, me and you love the Blogger and Stallion, it's caused division on Twitter. People don't like it. Especially, the some people do like it. I've seen lots and lots of tweets.
It's made me reevaluate my entire wardrobe, to be honest.
It's quite interesting. While you've been talking, I've just been looking at the racing bloggers' Twitter feed. And I noticed that he's rehashed. He's removed a lot of posts. Certainly, looks like all the drunken posts that came from York appear to have been removed, and he's replaced them by rehashing, tweets from 7th of June 2019 when Blogger met legend Wasim Murphy, or Isheen Murphy, sorry, and all the drunken stuff appears to have been removed. Possibly that was in reaction to the fact that I basically called it, he's acting like a prick.
Yeah, I've probably got a nice photo of him at the National Studio holding a fall or something. Yeah.
Well, racing is a fun sport, and it should appeal to young people and everything else like that. But we're talking about racing. In no other sport do you see either pundits, bloggers, or presenters of the sport, or people who desire to be that, because undoubtedly that's what he desires. A position on ITV, for example, is what he desires. But in no other sport do you see people going on about how bladdered you get, how drunk you can get, and appealing to the dark side of racing, because undoubtedly the amount of alcohol that's consumed and other banned substances is the dark side of the sport. People are getting very drunk quite often in race tracks. It is the dark side of the sport. It's I would like to see racetracks focus more on things like coffee and creating that much more of a family style environment. But it's extremely profitable and everything else like that. But I look at his posts and I think, well, if I was somebody that was only going there to get bladdered, to get drunk, the dark side of the sport, or I used drugs, I would look at the kind of posts by him and that complete idiot, his sidekick, whatever they call him, the Stallion, rolling around and pouring alcohol straight from the bottle into his mouth. I would look at that and I would say they're doing absolutely nothing for racing, nothing other than than treating it like they're acting like a couple of yobbos. They're not doing anything to bring anything new into the sport. Racing isn't about going there and getting pissed and drinking yourself silly and then going into town afterwards and rolling around the floor and then splashing it all out as if this is what it's all about. It's not. It's about the posts that he puts out about Enable, for example, which I enjoyed. I think a lot of people enjoyed that when Enable, unfortunately got beat at Longchamp for some people. So, when you see things like that, you go, that's a positive outlook. That's good for the sport. He was cheering on Enable. Enable unfortunately got beat. Posts like that or interviews with Aidan O'Brien and things like that, they're a positive. All the drunken shit, that he can just leave that all behind. And for as long as he continues to do that and appeals to not only drunks, but people who take banned substances. I'm not saying that he does himself take banned substances, but he's appealing to them. He's appealing to the dark side of the sport. And for that, to me, he's just a wanker. And he needs to get away from that side of things and promote much more of a positive outlook. I'm not looking for him to turn into Ed Chamberlain, all fluff and nice and everything's wobbling, sweetie two shoes and everybody's marvellous and every race is marvellous. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about presenting a more positive outlook that's about the sport and about as far as the betting is concerned, well, I look at some of the things they put out there. He used to do business with us. I was not comfortable. He came to me. I was not comfortable with the level at which he was betting, and he was shut down based on the level on which he was betting. And rumours within the industry, they're unsubstantiated, that he was basically having his accounts wiped off, fake bets, all this kind of stuff. And I did not want to be associated with that. By the way, I've never been involved in things like that. I've no idea whether any of these rumours are true, but I am not associating my company with that kind of thing if it turns out that way.
Fair shout. That's Jeff's response to the blogger. John, anything to add to that?
I think Jeff makes a very good point, actually, about the way racing is marketed to the masses and the presenters of racing, how they're on occasion allowed to just act the goat, if you like. I was watching At the Races coverage from Windsor a couple of weeks ago one night, and they were down by the riverbank. There was a couple of jockeys, and they went and jumped in, and then bugger me, Matt Chapman went and jumped in after them. Mm-hmm. And this was highlighted either by At the Race or Racing TV, whatever, on Facebook. And I basically put on there that I thought it was a load of shit. And I got torn to pieces over it.
I think. Look, I'm a fan of Matt Chapman's presentation style. He's very engaging. He's very out there. He's occasionally outspoken, but you know what? He's very positive about the sport. He's got a lot of constructive things to say. He is the diametric opposite of people like Stephen Power. He is just the diametric. He is promoting, and by the way, what's good about Chapman is the fact that he looks at the good and bad in racing equally, and he's not afraid to voice his opinions where he sees something, for example, that is wrong. He's another, like Graham Cunningham is another excellent exponent. Lydia Hislop. These are the kind of journalists that I respect in the sport. But as I say, Stephen Power has removed many of the what I call the offensive tweets from last week, and I hope that if you look at his tweets now, that those that are left on his blog, he's obviously cleaned up his output, and if he continues in that vein, he'll have my support. Doesn't need it.
My point about Chapman, Jeff, it wasn't so much that he's not engaging. The point I tried to make on the Facebook post was that other sports just do not have presenters acting like that in an attempt to sell it to anybody that doesn't particularly like the sport. You wouldn't say Gary Lineker chucking a couple of footballers in the Thames and jumping after them.
Well, but Gary Lineker's terribly dull, isn't he? He's a good anchor, but he's dull as he's not got a lot to say in life. I'd much rather listen to Roy Keane and people like that. I
take your point. I mean, Roy might chuck a couple of people in the chat.
Yeah.
He wouldn't be jumping in after them, would he? Unless he was going to.
Yeah, no. Roy's right, well out there, but people enjoy listening to him because he's not afraid to voice his opinion. And from that point of view, I can respect Chapman because he works for ITV. It'd be very difficult to get literally buried in the fluff. When you work for ITV, Kamani and Ed Chamberlain, and Ollie, they okay, fine. They know what the animal is, and their viewing figures are quite good. I wouldn't say they're outstanding, but their viewing figures are quite good, and they understand the ITV product, and they deliver on the ITV product. And Matt has survived with that company and survived with that network, despite the fact that he is quite outspoken. And I think you have to give him, a little tap on the back for doing that.
Good stuff, John and Jeff there on commenting on the sort of media of the sport there, Blogger, Chapman, etc. We hope you've enjoyed the show. We've overrun our time. It's been a long show, but I really hope you've enjoyed it. We certainly got through a few subjects, and big thanks to Jeff for coming on because, it's never easy when you're the sort of the whipping post, if you like, or potential whipping post.
Yes, I'll be getting some abuse for this.
Possibly, but
I've tried to be as honest as I can about things and my father and
absolutely
and how to run business, and I respect.
And there's one thing I admire on Twitter is that you will take it. I do respect that. In terms of whether people agree with you or disagree with you.
Life is about characters.
Absolutely. And maybe Jeff, we can have you on. Maybe Jeff
was one of the best, wasn't he? So
absolutely.
He mad, and but people enjoy that.
Yeah. And maybe we can have you on the show again sometime for another chewable topic.
I very much enjoyed the chat, and I hope your listeners did too.
I'm pretty sure they will do. So that's all from us. We'll be back on Friday with the usual Bar Stewards preview show, and then the normal Sunday sermon. We hope you've enjoyed it. That's all from me, John, and Jeff. Bye for now.